you just came on my podcast a little while back and we talked about how, the next gen is Gen Beta, but, we decided that Gen Bitcoin is probably a better term for them. I'm 19. I'm, studying computer science, college student and everything. And it's been pretty crazy getting to meet people, getting to have, people like yourself on and chatting Bitcoin and learning. Bitcoin to us is viewed as something for people that already have money. As you said, right? It fixes the problem of now you have the money. What do you do with it? What do you do when you don't have the money in the first place? Gives a kind of a glimpse into how Gen Z is already okay with adopting a digital currency, adopting a new form of money or even investment, right? Bitcoin is not where you're going to go if you want to get rich quick. That's within the premise of what it stands for itself, right? It's all about long-term conviction and hodling, as you guys like to call it. What if you just put $1 in the exchange and then they do that? And I'm like, what if you just set up a DCA? What if you put $1 every other day, every week, whatever you want? So yeah, with Gen Z, it's all about framing cryptocurrency. It's all about framing Bitcoin.
Hi, Nicki. How are you doing? Everything fine on your end?
I'm doing well. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. You had me on your podcast a couple of weeks or months ago, something like that. And it was so fun. And I told you this on your podcast. You are a very rare creature in Bitcoin, not only because you're female, but even more importantly, because you are 20 years old. This is extremely, extremely rare in Bitcoin.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm 19. I'm, studying computer science, college student and everything. And it's been pretty crazy getting to meet people, getting to have, people like yourself on and chatting Bitcoin and learning. Yeah, I find that, no matter what the generation difference is, it's so easy to talk to other Bitcoiners. It's almost like I'm talking to them as if I were talking to one of my friends. So that's really awesome.
Yeah, this was this really interesting thing. And I want to get into this generational thing because I think Bitcoin as generational wealth and what it means, especially for young people, is extremely important and really, really interesting also. But I just was at BTC Balkans and was there, and I talked with a guy who was a Bitcoiner, and we had a great conversation. And then his girlfriend was next to him and was kind of saying, oh, how long do you already know each other? You're a good friend of my boyfriend, right? And I was like, no, I just talked 10 minutes to him. I never had met him before. And she had that feeling that we both talk like really good and long friends. So there's a weird Bitcoiner thing going on because I don't want to rant too long, but I think this this early adopter, innovative curve. And some people say we are now entering the early majority or the early adopters. I think we're still in the innovator phase and we're still very down there in the early innovators. So yeah, I think we are way earlier than most people think. How do you look at that?
Yeah, I definitely agree. We are earlier, but in a way, I think we're also doing a lot better than I think a lot of Bitcoiners tend to give us credit for. Especially, if we look at within Gen Z itself, so if we look at people my age and a little bit older, about 51% of us have already owned crypto or own crypto currently. And this isn't Bitcoin specific, but I think it gives a kind of a glimpse into how Gen Z is already okay with adopting a digital currency, adopting a new form of money or even investment, right? So I always, like to bring up that stat because it does show that the Gen Z especially, and, as a byproduct, all of us are a little further ahead than we think we are.
There's a big difference, in my opinion, between crypto and Bitcoin. And so when I look at the people that I know of, and I don't know that many under 20 years old people, but they are more likely to be into some meme coin or some gaming token, and then in actual Bitcoin, which kind of worries me, but it's also, I feel it's understandable. So do you also see that difference between Bitcoin and crypto? I mean, you with your channel, you probably also see how old your viewership is.
I mean, yes, obviously one of the biggest things of Bitcoin is Bitcoin, not crypto, right? So it's a whole different game in itself. But the way that I look at it, when you are speaking with someone who doesn't have any knowledge of Bitcoin or Dogecoin, Solana, anything, and they're simply just stuck in this saving in a bank account and investing in the S&P 500 kind of mindset or matrix, as a lot of people call it, getting them to understand cryptocurrency as a whole is your biggest hurdle. So I'll give you examples. I have tried to orange pill a lot of my friends, and the most success that I've had is with the ones that have some knowledge or have had some previous or prior investment in, something like Dogecoin when it was still, doing something, or someone who invested in Solana, as opposed to, some of my other friends who were simply just putting it in their Roth IRA and putting a little bit into Vanguard or something like that. So I think because crypto itself is just so daunting, so closed off to someone who's new to finance, new to even, computer science or economics, any of this, you need to kind of get their foot in the door. And, even though, it's 51% of Gen Z that, own crypto, it's still, pretty big. We can take that 51% and we can convert it from owning crypto to owning Bitcoin. Once you've got 51%, you've got majority of the generation. And these stats are specific to the US. So it's not a worldwide thing or anything, but if you can get Gen Z in the US to adopt it, you can get Gen Z in other countries as well as a byproduct.
So like almost seeing crypto kind of as a gateway drug for Bitcoin, as seeing like, hey, you come in and you want to gamble, you come in, you kind of want to have this meme coin or like this gaming token, or you do any of that. And then you see like, oh, like what is the biggest coin in the space? And you kind of see, oh, this is actually the safe haven that I want to have. Like that's kind of what you're getting to.
Yeah, exactly. I think so. A lot of Gen Z, they want to make money, right? They want to make money fast as well. And Bitcoin is not the place for that. To start things off, Bitcoin is not where you're going to go if you want to get rich quick. That's within the premise of what it stands for itself, right? It's all about long-term conviction and hodling, as you guys like to call it. So I think getting them in with just any kind of cryptocurrency opens the idea of having a new kind of investment. And as I mentioned earlier, right, that's the biggest part. So a lot of my friends that were into Solana, what I've done is I've managed to be like, okay, you have your quick returns, but let me put you onto Bitcoin. Instead of taking what you're doing and saving in your fiat savings account with some bank that, has like a 1% to 2% in interest rate, while inflation itself, what's reported is 3%. Let's look into Bitcoin. What if you take what you're saving and you start saving in Bitcoin instead of saving in your fiat savings account? So it's kind of just, again, it's that foot in the door approach, because this is a little bit, a little off tangent, but back in my psychology class, I took a psych class last year, and we learned about two approaches to getting people to kind of give you what you want. And one of them was the door in the face approach, where it was like you ask them a really big thing and then they say no. And then you ask them a small thing and then they're more inclined to say yes to you, because in their mind, you've compromised on what you actually wanted. And so that makes them, a little, they feel bad for you. And they're like, okay, so in that case, I'd be like, going to my friends, I'd be like, you should buy Bitcoin. You should invest in this and you should invest in this. And they'd be like, no, that's crazy. And I'll be like, okay, what if you just open a Strike account? What if you just put $1 on the exchange? And that approach works. On the other hand, it's like, what if you just put $1 on the exchange? And then they do that. And I'm like, what if you just set up a DCA? What if you put $1 every other day, every week, whatever you want? So yeah, I mean, with Gen Z, it's all about framing cryptocurrency. It's all about framing Bitcoin in a way that they can understand. And that's why I found it that anyone who has been immersed in this world, they have an easier time converting to full-time Bitcoiners. So I know that was a kind of a tangent and I went a little all over the place, but I hope that, gave some clarity into why I said what I said.
I love that, and it's really important to get into the psychology of it, because like I think it all comes down to marketing, and we don't want to hear that, but Bitcoin, in my opinion, has the best and biggest marketing team ever. And we are not biggest, like we are very small actually. We have the best ones because like we are very small. I mean, on my podcast, there's probably like 90 or 80% of all Bitcoiners already on there that are loud in the sphere. And since a longer time in the sphere, there are a lot of new players in the sphere that might just like join recently, or like people that aren't as loud or not as regular here. But like most of them, they're like really loud and known in the space. Like we're already in the podcast, like 80% of them. And so if you see that, you're like, oh, like it's like 500-600 people. Yeah, but we have, I don't know, 100 million people in Bitcoin, or maybe 200, like depending on like what statistics you look. Maybe we even have like 500 million. It's a very, it also depends on like what do you count as a Bitcoiner? Because in your statistics, if like with Gen Z, 51%, I guess there are a lot of people on there that like open an account and put like $10, in some coin. It's like, yes, they already experience it, but like, do they understand anything, and like do they actually have any exposure? So like any adoption thing, I always look a little bit carefully, because they might just be skewed towards like getting the biggest possible number on there. And so when I said in the beginning of like, we like in the very early stages, is like how many people on earth as a percentage have more than 30% of their liquid net worth in Bitcoin? And I would argue it's like not even 1 million people. Like there are like very few people that actually do that. And that's what I like mean with like very early on. But I totally like, especially in the US, because Bitcoin is a topic that comes from bottom up and top down. So like bottom up, like your neighbor talks about it, and top down, like your president is talking about it. Like the US is in a great sphere where they could actually achieve a huge Bitcoin adoption wave in the next 5 years, just because they are marketing it well and they are accepting it. So I don't know. I'm really excited about the Bitcoin adoption in general. I see a lot of positive things, and I now finally see also young people, like Joey from like Australia. Like he will be soon also on the podcast. I was on his podcast, and there are like a bunch of other people that like a bunch is maybe like a few other people that I know of that are under my age, because I'm 27. So I'm the second oldest age you can be in Gen Z. So we're the same generation, but I'm like 8 years older than you. And so getting the people that are under 20, like you can just see it from my guests actually. So you're under 20. I think you are one of 4 people or 5 people that are under 20 years old on my podcast. Wow. And I had like about 600 guests on, and I had at least 10 people over 60 on, or probably like 20 or 30. Like I have more people over 60 than under 20. And this kind of shows of like, you get Bitcoin when you have money, because then you have a money problem and then you need Bitcoin. So I'm so psyched that you're into Bitcoin. And maybe you don't get it like how psyched I am, because this shows kind of that the younger generation gets Bitcoin and not just the gambling crypto kind of a thing, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The biggest difference between what Gen Z needs with Bitcoin and what, has brought a lot of the Gen X or the boomers or even the millennials to an extent is we don't have money. We don't have money quite yet, but we're going into the time, a lot of us are going to graduate college in a time where the job market is essentially the worst it's ever been technologically, right? We are entering the age of AI, and we're seeing, so many just doubts among students. I'm studying computer science myself, and so I've had a lot of friends who are also studying computer science, and we kind of like sit around when we go out to get dinner and stuff, and we're kind of like, yeah, we're screwed. None of us are going to have any entry-level software engineering jobs, or, some people want to go into like data science or machine learning, and all of this eventually is going to be replaced with AI. I'm friends with commerce students who want to be, I don't know why, but they want to go into accounting, or they want to go into investment banking or venture capital. And the second two are, a little less in danger from AI, but things like accounting, being a paralegal, all of this is going to change in the next 5 to 10 years. And so that fear in itself is already so much for Gen Z to handle. And when you throw in everything that's happening in the world and just the fact that we have this completely broken money system that we're expected to get our starts in and save up and buy a house and buy a car and get married and have a family, and there's all these expectations of what a great life should look like that we just can't have because we are starting. It's like if the start line was here for all the previous generations, right? For us, it's been pushed down here. We have to work so much harder to just get to where our previous generations were able to start when they graduated college. And that in itself is so terrifying. So obviously Bitcoin's never going to come as a solution or any sort. It's not even going to show up in any Gen Z person's lives because Bitcoin to us is viewed as something for people that already have money. As you said, right? It fixes the problem of now you have the money. What do you do with it? What do you do when you don't have the money in the first place?
Yeah, it's like and it is, I think this is the general problem. If you, like, I don't know what the average net worth for someone under 20 is, but I would assume it's like very low. And so if you have like $1,000 or maybe $2,000 in the bank account, even if Bitcoin, let's say, does like a 100x over the next 30, 40 years, it doesn't sound that good, for someone that only has $1,000. And then if you tell them, oh, you can invest there and maybe you just make a 10x tomorrow. And, this makes a huge difference for you in your life. So like, I have a lot of empathy actually for that, because if you're in that situation and you don't earn money and you just like have a little bit, you're very much likely to gamble a lot more than if you have more money. Because if you have more money, you're trying to play it more safe, and then you also like figure out Bitcoin quicker, which is interesting. Not a most important question that I actually wanted to start with, but it's like, how did you get into Bitcoin? Like, what was crypto also for you kind of the gateway, or like did you like actually get started with Bitcoin?
So my story is a little bit different because my family is full of Bitcoiners. So both my parents, my dad especially, they are really, really big on the orange pill. And they got into Bitcoin, I think 2017, but really, really got into it 2021 or 2022. And since then, it has just been Bitcoin galore in my house. I mean, every dinner table conversation is about Bitcoin or Jerome Powell, or it's about some book that they've read. And so it's always kind of just been around me. But I was so young. In 2022, I was 16, right? I was in my junior year of high school. I wasn't paying any attention. I wasn't even working at the time. So I had no knowledge of what money actually is and what to actually do with your money when you started earning. That being said, my parents have always prioritized, being financially literate. And so they were handing me, books like The Psychology of Money was the first finance book that I read by Morgan Housel. And it's a great book. It talks about how other people will view money with a different lens than you. And the biggest lesson I learned from it, again, is that nobody's crazy. Just because, you're a little more conservative with your spending, you're a little more liberal with your spending, doesn't make you crazy or the opposing part crazy. But, that's a bit off topic. Then in I think 2022, I was doing the IB program, and for that we have to write this 4,000-word research paper on any topic of our choosing. So I, was hearing about Bitcoin a lot, and in my history class, we were talking about what happened in 2008, and I was like, interesting. 2008, the financial crisis, and Bitcoin came out just about the same time. I wonder if there's any connection there. So I did more research into it, and at this time, the paper that I wrote, it was very focused on the technology of what Bitcoin is. So I did a lot of work into looking at the blockchain, at SHA-256, at a lot of encryption, decryption algorithms. I looked into all the nodes and all the mining, and I thought this part was really interesting. And I've always been someone who's very mathy and very into computer science, very into algorithms. So I was like, this is the coolest distributed system that I've ever seen, right? The whole idea of a blockchain is insane. I mean, to put it into perspective, just yesterday, or I guess it would be today-ish, depending on where you are, AWS went down. AWS went down and the entire world just completely like crashed. I was going to class and my Canvas wasn't working and lecturers were like, what do we do? Right? I mean, it's crazy. That doesn't happen on the blockchain. And so that part really just intrigued me back then, but I never really saw the kind of economic or the financial implications of what Bitcoin was. And then fast forward a little bit, it's like 2025 in January or February. My dad sits me down to watch What's the Problem by Joe Bryan. And that video, when I tell you, completely just shook my entire world. It was the sole explanation that I needed to answer a lot of the questions that I had about the price increases and the, rent hiking and all of that was going on around me, right? To, again, put things into perspective, I've been at college I'm finishing off my second year. My rent has increased 3 times. That's not normal. And yet each time it's like a $30 Australian dollar increase. That's pretty substantial. In Australia, we also pay rent by the week. So, for anyone who's in the US watching this, you can take that as 30 by 4. That's $120 extra dollars a week, a month. So all of this, seeing Joe, What's the Problem? And then I read the Bitcoin Standard. I read Broken Money. All of this kind of just connecting the dots and being like, wow, like there's something deeply wrong with the system. So I've never been into crypto or meme coins or anything like that. Even with investing, I've always been kind of S&P 500 or, Vanguard or, putting into the Mag 7 companies and things like that. So I've had a little bit of a different journey than what you might hear talking to the average Gen Z. But again, everything, I was super lucky to have parents who knew about this and were kind of like, you need to learn. Your future rides on this. And so my brother and I, big time Bitcoiners, started the podcast to just kind of get an opportunity to talk to people and film it, document the whole learning journey and, kind of show what that looks like when you're young and you're trying to break into this space.
I love that story because it shows the power of what it's probably like someone in your family started it, like just like from what you tell, like probably your dad, but like someone in the family actually started it, and then like, oh, let's orange pill my partner, my wife, like your mom, then like it came to you and your brother, and it's like one guy or one girl in one family can make all the difference, and can give the next generation more hope. And so with you having Bitcoin from age like 18, 17, 19 onwards, it's a huge head start for you because you know that you can save money. And so every month you're making a little bit more and you can just save that. It's tremendous for your life. I had that also, that lucky head start where I saved and invested since I'm 18 years old. And it made all the difference and made me as free as I possibly can, and made me realize that I can do whatever I want because I have security, not because of my parents and not because of anyone else. I have security because I saved money the last 5-10 years. And this makes all the difference for you. And I can't wait to sit down with you again in 10 years and look back at this very episode and look what Bitcoin kind of made you do in the next 10 years, because you had the security with Bitcoin, and then you can really like make a bunch of impressive stuff. Like I'm not a prophet, so I don't know what your next 10 years look like, but I have a weird feeling that it will be huge, just because you already get that you can save in Bitcoin. So thank you so much for sharing that story. I think it's a great testament of why we should care about Bitcoin and why one person being orange pilled really matters. And then like the person orange pilling the loved ones first. I always say like, don't care about the aunt that you hate, care about your wife, care about your husband, care about people that you really love, like your kids or or if you're the kid, your parents, or your uncle that was always there for you. Like start with the people that you love and work yourself, work the way out of that cycle, of that, social circle. And this is a great testament to that. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, of course. I think, a little bit more on that. People are more inclined to listen to the people that they love as well. So again, a lot of my friends, they did not care about Bitcoin. They did not care about saving, investing, any of that. And then when I kind of sat them down and was like, are you seeing these problems? Are you seeing that your rent, again, has increased 3 times in the past 2 years? Are you seeing that your grocery bill that used to be some 75 or 80 Australian dollars has now gone up to almost like 95? Are you seeing this? Are you connecting the dots? This isn't normal. And now I don't have an amazing conversion rate, but I think 2 out of the 6 people have bought their first Bitcoin, which is incredible. I got them set up on Strike. I got them to put in just like $5, $10. One of them even has a DCA set up. And then I was like, this is awesome. And I zapped them some sats as well. I was like, look at that. Like, I'm paying you to do this, guys. Come on, look at this. It's incredible. So people are more inclined to listen to people that they love. And I guess for anyone, if for yourself or anyone who might be listening to this that is a parent, as kids, we are going to listen to our parents. I think that is something that's instilled in us from day one. And you have this idea of, okay, if my mom and dad are so big on something, it probably has to have some truth to it. Especially when, you see them consuming a lot of media, reading a lot of books, talking to other people. My dad was going to Bitcoin conferences and I was like, there's community here. There are other people. Maybe this is something that's worth looking into. So I think just that's the best thing you can do is just try, like keep relentlessly trying. If you ever do get to meet my dad, he'll be at the Bitcoin conferences here and there. You can ask him. He has been trying to get me specifically to learn about Bitcoin and even just pick up my first Bitcoin book for for literal years. And I think the day I was like, hey dad, I think I'm thinking about a Bitcoin podcast. It was like Christmas came early for him. I mean, he's just over the moon. He's like, this is awesome. Like, I'm so proud of, I think he was prouder of me on that day than he's ever been with like any of my exam scores or anything like that. Like, he was just over the moon. So, a bit of a tangent, but, if a personal kind of cultural connection helps, put anything into perspective, then I think I'm your girl for that.
I love that. I just thought of an interesting question. Because you're so young, it will probably take some time also that, I don't want to instill anything, but till your kids will grow up and actually also have money. And so it will probably take like 20, 30 years. I don't know, like whatever till your kids are like in the age of using money. And I thought about that myself a lot. And that's why I'm asking a question, because I'm like kind of the same generation of like, what will the world look like for my kids? Like, what is the world looking like if my kids are touching money for the first time ever? And the age is probably 15 years old, like 15 to 20. It's like somewhere like the touch points with money come into existence. If you're not Warren Buffett with like 12 or like 11, where you make your first small business. And so if you think about your future kids and when they are growing up and being just 4 years younger than you are right now, with 15 years old, what do you think will that world look like? And how close are we to like this Bitcoin vision that we might not even need a bank account and like it's permissionless and all the things that we as Bitcoiners want to see?
This is a really great question. I think let's look in the past a little bit to kind of set the stage for what I'm trying to build here. So if we let's start with millennials. If we look at millennials, they were kind of the first generation to adopt this mindset of high time preference. And safety in the Bitcoin standard talks a lot about how Bitcoin is all about low time preference, and most people have a high time preference, right? And that was because the money was so broken, and millennials think about what was happening at that time, right? You had Y2K that was happening. The 90s were very hippie culture. Everyone was kind of distrusting the media and institutions. And so they adopted this mindset of wanting to prioritize their quality of life over saving. And there was an article that I read on Essence just recently that said something like 60% of Gen Z and millennials prioritize a higher quality of life as opposed to oversaving really aggressively. And so what does that tell you? That tells you that our generations want freedom now, right? And not at like 65 or anything like that. They want to go all in and just live their life completely. I mean, so that kind of started with the millennials. It got worse with Gen Z. A lot of my friends don't have savings accounts. That's not good. Either they don't have savings accounts or they have a savings account and there's maybe $200 in there. And $200 is not a lot to put in a savings account, right? This is 200 Australian dollars. So really this can't get you anywhere. Say, God forbid you do end up in a situation where you do need to tap into this. $200 can't even cover most medical expenses. We are becoming increasingly more nihilistic with every generation that goes on. And the next generation that's come after us is Gen Alpha. And I think this is the last year for Gen Alpha. So the oldest that they are right now, I think is 15. I think they're 2010 to 2025 or something like that. And the youngest that they are is 0. So they're very young, but kind of coming into that age where they're going to start coming into high school and then working. And by the time that, Gen Z is a little older and they're thinking about getting married and having kids, Gen Alpha is going to be in the place where Gen Z is right now. And the way that I see it in the next 5 to 10 years, I don't think we're going to have a crazy spike in people being like, oh yeah, Bitcoin is the way. Because this isn't an enlightenment, right? This isn't something that you just go to sleep one night and then you wake up the next night and you're like, Bitcoin is the way. Bitcoin is everything. Everything that I've learned in school, in the real world while working is just wrong. I need to throw away all of my USD and convert it into sats. But there is hope for the gen that comes afterwards. And you just came on my podcast a little while back and we talked about how, the next gen is gen beta, but, we decided that gen Bitcoin is probably a better term for them.
The most important thing for your Bitcoin journey is not buying Bitcoin, but it's how to keep them. And yes, you have maybe the right tools, but how do you actually go ahead and stick it all together so it's the most secure for you personally? Self-custody is a deeply personalized journey. And the Bitcoin way is helping you exactly finding that correct setup for you personally. They're also helping you with securing your own cybersecurity. And if you want to go one step above all that, you can even get a consultation for a Plan B residency. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Robin and you will get a 30-minute free consultation. I finally and officially mine Bitcoin. This is not just something to stack more Satoshis, but it's most importantly also to support the network. Individual miners are the ones that keep the Bitcoin network decentralized. And by the way, you get KYC free Bitcoin. That's why I use simplemining. I get an actual proper Bitcoin miner. They set it up for me. They repair it if it breaks down. And most importantly, they let me choose the pool and even connect my own full node. I'm completely sovereign and I'm completely in control, and I can sign up with Ocean, no account needed. I just give them a Bitcoin address and then there's mining going on. No KYC, nothing. So if you're ready to mine Bitcoin, go to simplemining.io, tell them you come from Robin, and let's mine Bitcoin together. I want to tell you about something very special to me. It's called Microseed. If you hold your Bitcoin in self-custody, and you should, you know how critical pinnacle it is to secure your seed phrase. You should not have them on paper. You should not have them on anything else than titanium. With Microseed, you can engrave your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, the entire seed phrase, onto a 1-inch small washer. Yes, just one washer. All 24 words on that one washer. You can hide that thing everywhere. And even better, you don't need to buy a new kit every time you have to get a new wallet. You can make unlimited backups because Microseed is not selling the washer. Microseed is selling the device that stamps the washer. So you get the full kit with the device, with the washers, with the hammer, with everything you need to get started today. And you can make with that unlimited amount of backups. Go now to microseed.io. Again, that's microseed.io to get your last backup tool you ever need.
They are going to come of age at a time where the world is going to look absolutely nothing like what we are seeing right now. And this is scary, yes, but in a way it should give you so much hope, because I like to think of Bitcoin and AI as two sides of the same coin. Both are the pinnacle of innovation, of technological entrepreneurship, and this is going to revolutionize industry completely. I had a chat with Cam Duty. I released it last week, and Cam is he's a venture capital. He does venture capital, and he invests a lot in AI startups, a lot of them who work in Bitcoin as well. And one thing that he was talking about was how he is seeing so much more room and so much more drive and determination amongst Gen Z who's working in tech to create something. And that is really where he sees the future going. And there are a lot more people that, you can listen to if you do find this as an interesting topic. I really do. Again, it's what I'm studying. It's where I want to see my future. So one of them that I love listening to is Balaji from the Network State. He is just great at explaining where he sees the world and how he sees the internet as the future of not only money, but as the future of community and nation states as well. And that's, not relevant to this podcast, so I won't get into that. But with all of the innovation that we are expected to see in the world and all of the things that we have, really cool people talking about, it should give Gen Z hope for a better future for their children. And I know it definitely gives me hope. So I think Gen Bitcoin might be the first generation that would be able to grow up in a world where they're able to go to their local cafe and maybe get their latte in Bitcoin. And I think that is just awesome. We see that happening now, but it's not very globally adopted. I don't know any places near me that accept Bitcoin. I don't know how it is for you or, what it looks like in the US currently, but it's definitely not at the stage of global adoption where it will be in the next, 15, 20 years. So it really the future that I envision for my children, as far out as it may be, I do see a world where they have a money that never lets them stress, a money that is like, you just do what you want to do. I will sit here and I will keep increasing my value. I will keep deflating because Bitcoin is a deflationary asset, right? That's like the base ground of Bitcoin. So yeah, I know that it's important to look at the patterns in what's happening in previous generations. And it really is within, I think, Gen Z especially, to ensure that the nihilism we carry does not go forward with the other generations that come after us.
And I think it's so interesting when we look about Gen Z, because we definitely have a falling thing where the money, the default money, like the euro, the yen, the dollars, like all of those currencies that we have in our system, which are currencies and not money, those get actually worse over time. So 100 years ago, like 50 years ago, it was a lot better than right now, because we have never printed so much money. It's like the inflation was bad in some times. Like there was like hyperinflation in Germany, like in the history, like if you picked a certain time. But we have such a huge level of inflation on a global level currently, where it's really hard for newer generations to save in that. And the problem is that they still think they have to save in those currencies. And it's almost like the boomers and the above generations are stealing the future right now from the generation C. And I don't like that thinking, because I think no generation really steals from any other generation. Because it's the central bank that steals and not any generation. But what I mean by that is the older generations are the ones that hold the assets, and the younger generations just don't have the money to hold any assets. And so the asset holders, because of the central bank, are getting richer over time, and the money has to come from somewhere, and it comes from the people that hold the fiat currency. And so I almost look at Generation C, Generation Alpha, I think Generation Beta starts soon. All of that is like they got the future stolen before even getting here. And that's why I'm so big on Bitcoin, because once they get into Bitcoin, they have this hope back and they have this future back. And so that's why I love seeing young people like you just being into Bitcoin and saying like, hey, that's my savings vehicle, and then that's my money. And that's where I want to see the world going and the future going.
Yeah, no, it's Bitcoin is definitely a beacon of hope. I will give it that. I think, I find it really admirable that you are a lot more, optimistic towards the older generations, because the way that I see it and the way that a lot of my friends see it is just like, we are angry. I mean, we are so angry. And this isn't just monetarily, this is also in forms of the environment, in assets. Who owns all the houses in the US, right? This is the boomers that are owning up the houses. There's such an emphasis on needing to buy more property in order to have a good store of value, that now more Gen Z are living with their parents after the age of 18 than ever before. Now, that's not to say there aren't, benefits to living with your parents, but it should really be a red flag that adults are feeling like we don't have the means to move out, let alone get our early careers, get married, have children, and then, travel the world, all of that. We can't even, move out of our parents' homes. So there's this really large sentiment amongst Gen Z, especially the younger Gen Z, that the older generations, like you said, stole from us, and painting it as not the older generations, but as the central bank, as the banks and the governments, is so important, because it redirects the blame. When people are angry, they're always going to look for a place or somebody to put their blame on. And it's imperative that we make sure that blame is going to the correct place. I mean, let's think about it another way, right? A lot of us are under crippling student debt. I mean, in Australia, it's not as bad, but in the US, student debt is just insane. I don't remember the exact percentage of what Gen Z in the US is under student debt, but from what I remember, it's fairly high, and I did a video on this a while back. But it's not a good thing. It's really not a good thing. And it brings me back to the analogy that I gave earlier in this video as well, where the starting lines that a lot of the older generations have were here, but the one that we have is here. And part of the reason is because we're already under debt. Before we start, we already owe money. And that in itself is so wrong. And it's not the older generations that are making the debt worse for us. It's not, the fact that they're having more kids in some areas and the population is increasing or the population is declining. It's none of that. It's simply the fact that the dollar does not go as far as it used to when our parents were entering college and when they were graduating. And that in itself is just so important to understand. I mean, the way that I start any conversation with anybody about Bitcoin or money is just through inflation, because that is the easiest way to help someone get or grasp what is really happening to our dollar.
And it's so important, because I see a lot of people blaming the greedy corporations, the real estate owners, and they are just incentivized. They just live in a system that incentivizes to do those things. And especially the greedy corporations, I'm really annoyed because whoever knows about the free market knows that a corporation will not raise prices if they don't have to. So outside of having a monopoly, a corporation is incentivized to give the best price and give the best experience to the user. Because if there is a competitor with a better price and a better experience, that other company will get their business. And so it's just not possible that they charge way more than they could. And so when you look at that, you look back of if the condition is that there's no monopoly in a market, so there's like multiple competitors, they are incentivized to get the best product for the best price. Otherwise, they will get out of business. And this happens with innovations all the time. And also for real estate owners. I mean, if you are now 50 or 60 years old, you have seen so many people that live up and were getting rich with real estate. And then, of course, at some point, you're like, oh, I should own real estate. And it's not their fault that they buy real estate. It's not their fault that they buy apartment homes and like keep them empty, because it's actually better to just keep them empty, get a leverage on that, and just like keep the appreciating asset there, rather than just keep it on a bank account. And so it's the system's fault and not the people's fault. And this is where I'm like very picky when people say like, oh, he owns real estate, so he is our enemy. And we have to be very clear who's our enemy. And our enemy is the central bank, it's the system, and it's a long list of people. But even central bankers, to a degree, like there are a lot of central bankers that just live in that system and have no clue what's going on. And so they're not real enemies because they just wanted a job. Like they're like accounting guys and in a central bank working. They have no clue what's going on. So even people in central banks, so I always try to blame the system, and you cannot really fix a system, even if you have the best people within the system. So you have to find a new system. And so that's why I'm just like huge on Bitcoin. And like, I love to see young people in Bitcoin. Like that always gives me that always gives me like great hope for the future.
Yeah, no, I'm glad to hear that. And this is why it's so important to be big on Bitcoin as well, because it teaches you who is actually in charge. I mean, if you had talked to me even just a year ago, and I probably wouldn't have been able to explain the concept of inflation to you. I know that, inflation is a thing. I know that the government prints money, but, and this might be very stereotypical. This might be a very, kind of dumb moment, but I wouldn't be able to tell you why, printing more money is a problem. Because it's just that knowledge of what's actually going on and how do the government decisions affect our economy and as a byproduct affect our real lives. That's almost inaccessible to anyone who's not actively out there looking for it. And this is the biggest problem that I see with a lot of Gen Z adoption. It's just the fact that Bitcoin itself, it lives within the realm of economics and computer science. And both of these fields of study, both of these, knowledge bubbles are very inaccessible to anyone who doesn't know anything right off the bat. In order to learn about an encryption algorithm, you will probably have to go and you'll probably have to learn modular arithmetic. In order to learn about SHA-256, you have to go and learn what a hash function is. These things aren't easy to learn in the very beginning. Again, same things with economics, right? Last year I wasn't very strong with my economic knowledge. So I couldn't tell you why printing more money was a bad thing. Now I know. I went out and I looked for it. I took an intermediate microeconomics class. We talked about inflation. Granted, my prof loved to say that inflation was actually a good thing that was needed for the economy. And, you can get into the difference between Keynesian and Austrian economics if we really wanted to, but that's kind of off the bat for this question. The most important thing is making Bitcoin accessible and framing it as a solution. I think it's something around 75% of Gen Z. They say that they worry about inflation and market volatility more than older generations who are investing. This is specific to the Gen Z that actively invest. So that means 3/4 of us are already anxious about the economy, right? And that you can connect this back to so many things. This is why you see the rise in socialism. This is why you see the rise in anti-capitalists, in communism. Everyone is looking for something to blame. And the easiest thing to do is just say, yep, it's those people right at the top. It's the top 1% who are unethical, immoral, and stole from us. That's where you get the phrase eat the rich, or people like to say that no billionaire is an ethical billionaire. And I think that phrase in itself is just so demeaning to those people that have worked for what they have. They say this a lot about somebody like Taylor Swift. She's the biggest musician in the entire world. I think at the moment it's easy to give her that that title, and she has been putting out music for I don't even know how many years now. I think it might be 20, but people love to say that because she's a billionaire, she is unethical. Now, if you've worked for your money, if you've put out your own music, your own art toward yourself, how is it unethical if you're just getting rewarded because people actually like what you do? And this is my biggest problem with Gen Z. We are actively putting the blame in the wrong places, and you can't even blame us because we are not taught about what the actual problem is. So that's why when I watched What's the Problem in January, it clicked because my coffee was getting more expensive. I knew that, but then I learned why. Then I learned who was actually in charge of the coffee getting more expensive. Obviously, it's, by a long ladder. The coffee getting expensive is probably the last step down. But everything is consequential. Everything is just because we have governments that are unable to be firm and consistently will print more and more to get themselves out of debt. And so it's a really messed up system, and it's just the lack of knowledge that creates these anti-capitalist and socialist communist sentiments amongst Gen Z, because we're angry that our starting line has been pushed back. We're angry that a lot of us can't move out of our parents' homes and we can't find jobs, and then there's just so much uncertainty. So it's all about the way that you frame Bitcoin. It's all about, framing it as something that is a cultural movement as opposed to just yet another investment to put your money into. Gen Z does not like being told what to do with their money. They don't like being told what to buy, what to save. But they really like relating. They like seeing that they're being heard and understood and acknowledged. And that's why I think framing Bitcoin as a societal or a cultural movement is going to give the most success to anyone that is trying to push push Bitcoin to Gen Z and younger generations.
You are very impressive, honestly. It's because I told you this on your podcast. You are in Bitcoin, you're super young and you're female, which is very rare. But now in the past 1 hour, I also got to know that you are good in explaining what you know, and not a lot of people can do that. So thank you so much for being on the podcast, Nicki. I think
Thank you.
I think you proved that there's a lot of hope in the new generation, and that Gen Z is waking up to Bitcoin, and that we got that. And this is really, really cool. So thank you so much for what you're doing, and keep going. I'm really looking forward to what turns out with you in 10, 20 years. That will be awesome to see.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I mean, I have admired your channel for such a long time now, and it's definitely like it was one of the first Bitcoin podcasts that I started watching, and I just found it so awesome. So just to be on here and to be one of the videos that, you know, I used to watch back in the day, it's like almost surreal. Yeah, I hope, you know, that this was enjoyable. I hope that I was able to help.
That's awesome. And as you know, there are two more questions coming. The first question is, what can we learn from you outside of Bitcoin?
Okay. I see. I knew you were going to ask me this question, but I didn't think about it and I didn't come up with an answer. So everything that I'm going to say is it's just going to be right off the bat here. I think the biggest thing that I pride myself on, in fact, one of the only things that I pride myself on is just being able to understand where people are coming from, even if that is in misalignment or disagrees with what you believe. The biggest problem that our generation has is we are very divided on all sides of the spectrum. We are either yes or no, black or white. It's just awful. And because of that, there's increasing levels of intolerance. Intolerance isn't going to get you anywhere if you're trying to, you know, help someone understand what you're explaining to them. If you're trying to help someone understand that there is a way out of the problem that they're feeling. So because of that, I find that when you're having these conversations about Bitcoin, and you're going to have a lot of conversations about Bitcoin, especially if you're Gen Z and you're trying to help get this out to your peers and your friends, you're gonna have a lot of skeptics, a lot of people calling you crazy. I get a lot of DMs where people are like, "Since when are you like a finance guru?" I'm not a finance guru, but it's going to be weird. You have to sit down and you have to understand that not everyone is going to be in the same place as you, and you have to put yourself in other people's shoes. Having empathy is going to get you so far in the Bitcoin space, and that's all I can say. I mean, the one thing that I pride myself on is just the ability to be empathetic.
I think you're more of a finance expert than you might think.
Thank you.
And yeah, it's I love that you brought it up because it's a very rare possibility, a really rare trait that people have, a character trait that you can actually think of, like, where's the other person coming from. It's actually something, when I meet people in person, they often tell me they love that about the podcast because I have so many different people on, and I sometimes strongly disagree with someone that comes on and says something. But I'm not debating. I like to see where is he coming from, like why does he have that opinion, and not like, oh, you are wrong and here's why. This is like not good, but like that's a whole, I think that there's a whole nother topic for a whole nother podcast. As you well know, we have an end routine on the podcast where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is, and the previous guest asked you the question, what's stopping someone from selling their premium luxury items to get more Bitcoin? And so this is like an interesting one, because I truly believe each and every one has something that is, and like a luxury item doesn't have to be like a Ferrari. A luxury item can just be something that you don't necessarily need, but you really, really want it. For example, if like, I love watches, like I don't need a watch. Like I can just look on my phone. Like I could just sell all my watches, but I love them. And so, is there something that you have that like kind of unnecessary, like a premium item, and why don't you sell it for more Bitcoin?
So I think the way I'm going to answer this question is going to be a little bit different to what, you know, the previous guest might have been expecting, or even what you might have been expecting, because from a Gen Z lens, we don't have the luxury of luxury items quite yet. Our luxury items simply are just shopping sprees. Being able to go into the mall and spend some money on some clothes, to me and people my age, to people that are 20, this is a luxury. And that is something that needs to be controlled. Gen Z in itself has a huge spending addiction, and that all stems from the ideology that we have of high time preference. We value our short-term satisfaction more than any long-term, benefits or commitment. And because of that, if we look at girls specifically, I open TikTok, I see a cute skirt or a cute purse that somebody is wearing, and I'm like, ooh, okay, add to cart. That cycle repeats. Every week you see that there are now items in your cart, and I'm like, do I need this stuff? And I think I've gotten a lot better about, realizing that I don't need everything that I was spending money on. With that being said, though, I'm not perfect, and I still do spend my money on things that I don't necessarily need, because we're all human and we all are going to do that. But it's just this idea of, this is cute, somebody else has it, it's trending, I want it. And this isn't just girls, this is guys too, right? I mean, the amount of guys that I know that will be spending money on the biggest thing is sports betting. Bet365 and Kalshi, all of that is just so insane to me. I will never understand it, but I understand why someone might fall trap into one of those things, right? It's a quick way to get your money. It's like, okay, I'll put in $10 on this, and your returns, if you bet right, you can get like $100 back. That in itself is crazy. But it's just this idea that spending your money is for something now is better than saving it for something in the future that is a luxury within itself. So it's this idea, it's this thing that we have with high deference of, I want it now. I want everything now. I want to have a cute skirt now, a cute shirt now. I want to, win big because, I don't know, the Seahawks beat the 49ers or something like that. Now, that's stopping someone from putting everything they have, giving away all of their little daily luxuries and putting it into Bitcoin. So I hope that was a sufficient answer. I hope that, kind of put into perspective what I was trying to say a little bit.
100%. I loved it. I never bet on anything. It's super fun because I have actually some people that I know that like are regular betting, and I never understand it. I also never played the lottery. Like I say that often to people, like, if you see me betting on something, I only do it because I know I will win. And this is probably something that every addict to betting says. But I'm so aware that I just never bet. Like, I've never bet on a football game because I know that I don't know the outcome of it. Or like betting on like, hey, will Michael Seyr be on Joe Rogan's podcast? You can literally bet on that, if he will be on his podcast this year. And I don't know. Like, I'm fairly certain he will be at some point on Joe Rogan's podcast, but will it be this year, next year, or like in 10 years? I don't know. Maybe he will never be on his podcast because maybe Joe Rogan like doesn't like a small thing about him not. So like, if you see me betting on Michael Seyr being on Joe Rogan, this is only because Michael Seyr himself told me, hey, I was on his podcast and he will release it next week. And then I'm like, that's the moment where I bet. So like, it's like, betting is a stupid thing, and playing lottery is a stupid thing. So don't do that. It just burns money. I cannot relate to buying skirts. But I can relate to people betting because it's just like stupid. So thank you so much, Nicki, for being on. You have been an amazing guest. So thank you so much for bringing the young perspective on Bitcoin. It's amazing. Before I let you go, where can people find you? Where can people ask you questions, or where can people find your podcast?
Yeah, so my podcast is called the Orange Peel Pod. I also go by Nicki Sharma, so either of those. And I'm very active on X or Instagram, so if you're on either of those, I check my DMs, ask me any questions, anything. I'm looking forward to connect, and it's at Orange Peel Pod for both of those. So yeah, I mean, looking forward to seeing some of you guys and hearing from you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on. And also thank you so much for everyone that's watching and listening, for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye.
This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice.